Hi, I'm Sarah Smith, and I'm a horticulturalist here at Rogers Gardens. And today I'm going to be talking to you about growing citrus in Southern California. We are so lucky to live in Southern California because we can grow all different kinds of citrus, whether you live on the coast or you live more inland. You have all kinds of options. It's a really fun plant to grow. It's nice to be able to harvest something from your yard, but they're also very pretty and very attractive as long as you know how to take care of them right. There are some tips and tricks to keep them really green and lush. That's usually the problem that most people struggle with. As long as you know how to do that, you're going to be super successful. The really great thing about citrus is you can grow them in the ground or you can grow them in containers. So whether or not you have a large garden or you just have a small patio, there's lots of great citrus and lots of great options. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the fertilizers that you can use to keep them nice and green and lush. I'm going to talk about some of the pest problems that you can potentially have and some different varieties that will work well in your area or in your small space or large space. The first thing I want to go over is fertilizing. Citrus are really heavy feeders. Citrus are very dramatic and they'll show you when they're unhappy. So a lot of times people come in and they have really yellow leaves and they're thinking, what is wrong with this? And usually it's just a lack of nutrients. Citrus has kind of specific fertilizer needs, so it's really important that you have the right kind of fertilizer to make your citrus happy. Thing that I like the very best, this is Down to Earth, the citrus mix. This is a really awesome, well-balanced fertilizer. On the back of the box you'll see instructions for feeding 3 times a year. That's great if you're feeding things in the ground. If you're growing something in a container, I recommend feeding in between those 3 times a year, because what happens is you put the fertilizer in, as you water, it goes out the bottom of the hole, and then it's no longer available to the plant any longer because obviously the roots don't go out the bottom of your pot. So feeding in between is really important with this one. If you're working with a citrus that maybe you forgot to feed, or you're feeding the wrong thing and now you're trying to do a little bit of correction, I do recommend still using this one. But on top of that, this is a really great one. This is by Grow More. This has trace nutrients in there. This works really well for correcting yellowing problems. So it has extra iron, it has extra nitrogen in there, and this works great for fixing any problems you may have on your citrus. The really important one with this is if you have something planted in the bottom of a container or you have an underplanting underneath your citrus, make sure you don't put this fertilizer directly on the foliage of those plants because it could potentially burn them. So just make sure that you're really scattering it well on the ground and missing some of the foliage. And then you just water this in. Same thing with this one. It's really nice to have something that's pretty simple. You just scatter on the ground, water it in, and then you're pretty much done. One of the most common problems that you can have with your citrus is a pest called whitefly. With whitefly, underneath the leaves, you'll see almost kind of a stringy cotton candy-like material coming from underneath the leaves. Sometimes you'll even see the little whitefly flowing around. They kind of look like tiny little white moss, or you'll look underneath the leaf and you'll see almost like a tiny little perfect spiral shape. If you see those things, you know you have whitefly. So if you see that in your plant, the best thing you can use is something called worm castings. This is an all-natural organic substance. This is actually a fancy word for worm poop. But what this does, if you put it into your citrus and you just kind of top mulch it into the citrus, it's good all the way around, adds a lot of good nutrients and stuff, but it also adds an enzyme into the plant that the whitefly don't like. So it's really kind of interesting. It almost works like a natural systemic. It also just helps the overall health of the plant too, so it helps it fight off all the other things that they can tend to have as well. Some of the other common pests that you'll see in your plant is things like scale and aphids. If you have aphids, what you'll usually also see is things like ants. So you want to really check your plant and make sure you don't have an ant presence in there. The ants are really smart and they actually farm the aphids and move them around. The aphids actually eat from the plant. They take out all the sugars from the plant and then they actually poop out something called honeydew, which has sugar in it. So the ants are very smart. They're able to move them around and actually harvest all that from them. So if you see an ant presence, you know you have aphids. If you see a tiny little black spot that almost looks like a perfect little shell or little cap, then you know that you have scale. So the thing that I really like for that is the takedown spray. So the takedown spray has pyrethrins in it. It also has a light oil in it. So as you spray your plant, you're going to cover up those bugs with the spray, and that suffocates them. You want to make sure though when you're using this, because it does have an oil in it, that you're not using it on a really hot day. So just like humans, if you get oil all over them and then have them out in the full day sun, they can burn. So just be really careful with this. The last thing that I see a lot is people will come in and bring in leaves that are all kind of crinkly and curled up. This is a newer pest that we've been seeing here in Southern California. It's something called leaf miner. So it's actually a little moth that flies around. It puts its eggs on the tender new leaves. When that hatches, it burrows down into the leaf and it eats through the leaf. So you'll also kind of see a funny little zigzaggy, swirly sort of pattern on there, but you'll see it on the top of the leaf, and then as that leaf grows around the damage, it tends to kind of curl up. So if you see that starting on your plant, just really make sure you're paying attention to it as it's growing. It typically shows up around May. This is a really great product for this. So this is the insect spray. This has spinosad in it. That's the really important ingredient in here. The other thing that I also like this also has the potassium saltifatty acid, which is just a really fancy word for insecticidal soap. So this also works on some of your smaller soft-bodied insects as well. So it's kind of nice because you can kind of get different things with it, but this is really important when you start to see those little swirl patterns and the curling in the leaves. You can always pick off the worst looking leaves, but then make sure you start spraying with this one. And with this, you want to spray like every 7 to 10 days for about a month when you start seeing that, because that means that you have the presence of that bug around and it's going to keep laying eggs. So you're keeping the damage from happening and you're keeping the infestation from getting worse. So it's really kind of more of a problem with looks. It doesn't really hurt the plant too much, other than the fact that the plant starts to look kind of bad because all the new growth on top starts to curl and kind of look distorted. So picking off the damage helps, spraying definitely helps, just keeping check on it and making sure you're watching it for any kind of new damage as well. So when picking a location to grow your citrus, you want to think about a couple of different factors. One, is it going to go in the ground or is it going to go in a pot? Either way, you want to make sure that you're getting at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. They really thrive off of a lot of sunlight. Grow it in less. The plants still make healthy, but what will wind up happening is you won't get as much fruit from it. So to get the best amount of fruit, 6 to 8 hours is really important. You also want to make sure it's in an area where you're going to be able to water pretty freely. They like a lot of good drainage, so if you're doing something in a container, mixing potting soil with cactus mix really helps you have that good drainage. If you're planting it in the ground, you want to make sure that that area has good drainage, not going to stay too wet. They like deep, long watering, but infrequent watering. So if you're doing something in a pot, you want to just make sure that it's an area where you're getting that ample amount of sunlight. You can also move your container around, so you can always buy casters that you can put it on top of, so you can move it for the sun if you're dealing with a small patio where sometimes the sun shifts depending on the time of year. It's really helpful to have something like that, so it's just easy for you to move it into the sunlight as the sun shifts and as the days change. When planting in the ground, you just want to make sure that you use a really good compost. You want to dig your hole wider than the root ball, but not necessarily deeper. And then when you backfill it, you want to mix your native soil with compost about 50-50. It's also a great time at that point to put some worm castings in there as well, just to kind of get a head start on that. But just make sure that area is a place that really drains well, because the last thing citrus want is soggy feet. So when picking varieties, you want to think about where you live. Are you really coastal or are you really inland? If you're really inland, you really can get away with growing a lot of different things. Because more inland, your nights are a little bit cooler, but your days are a lot warmer. So you can get away with growing things like Washington navels and Valencias. Grapefruits work really well there too, plus all of your more sour things like lemons and limes and kumquats as well. If you're more coastal, because we tend to be a little bit cooler when it's coastal and our nights are a little bit warmer, we grow all of the lemons, the limes, and the kumquats really, really well. If you try to do something that's sweeter, it tends to not have have as much flavor if you're too inland. So stay away from like the mandarins and the satsumas and things like that. When picking out lemons, my favorites are the Meyer lemons and the Eureka lemons. The Meyer lemons are thinner skinned and they tend to be sweeter. I find them to be kind of special too because you typically can't get those in grocery stores because they don't really travel well. The Eurekas are more like your typical lemon you're gonna find in your grocery store. So it's gonna be a little bit more tart. If you're looking for that traditional tart lemon, you wanna go with the Eureka. When it comes to limes, we usually have bear limes and we have Mexican limes. Bear limes are a little bit sweeter. They look more like the lime that you're gonna get in the grocery store. But the Mexican limes are kind of like the key limes. So they're tiny and round. They work really great for making desserts. They work really great in having them in your beers. They're really a kind of fun, interesting little lime to have because it's not like anything that you usually find. We also do really, really well here with all the different kinds of mandarins. I love satsumas. It's one of my favorites. What's really great about a satsuma is that when you peel it, it peels very easy. There's a little bit of air that grows between the fruit and the citrus rind. So it pops open and peels really easy. It tends to be mostly seedless too. So it's great for kids because it's simple to peel. It's got a nice tart, sweet balance on it as well. So it's a really, really great one to grow. We're really lucky here to be able to grow citrus so easy and so freely. It's really kind of a nice thing. We don't have any kind of freezes here, so they grow year round. You don't have to worry about bringing your pots inside or anything like that. So we really, really get to be lucky to have all kinds of great citrus varieties available to us here. It's a pretty simple thing. As long as you're treating it right, you're watering it right, and you're fertilizing it well, it's going to be a really happy, bountiful, abundant plant for you. So if you have any questions, you can always leave your comments down below. You can also call us here at Rogers Gardens. We're always here to answer all of your questions here for you. You can shop online as well and see all kinds of great products that we have if you can't make it here into the store. And we really appreciate you tuning in. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page down below. If you haven't already, check out our Instagram and Facebook page. We put a lot of great material there as well. And we have a really fantastic newsletter that will really keep you up to date about all the great things that we have going on here at Rogers Gardens, so you're always in the know. So stay well, be safe, and happy gardening.